I'm gonna walk around for this part, and I'm a more visual person, visual learner. So I do have some slides for the first part of this, and then Jen is going to join me on stage, and we are going to have a little conversation about what I talk about now and some other things, and then we'll have some questions too. So think about your questions. So the title of this, Reinvigorating a Detroit Icon. And I think, we just heard in the introduction, we're in the midst of a revolution. Right now is so exciting. We are starting to see EV registrations go up so much. And it's really, as we look at, climate control and where everything has been going for so long. And GM has the vision of 0, 0, 0, and zero emissions, congestion, and crashes. But zero emissions is key to that. And as we look at that and all these changes that are happening and, these things that are happening by 2035, you need to have this and, all of the climate change that's happening, we want to be driving that revolution. We don't want to have to say, oh, we need to meet these things. We need to be driving that. And Cadillac is at the front of that for GM. So it's a really, really exciting time. This year, we are 120 years old. It's been 120 years of innovation and absolutely just an amazing, amazing brand. Now, if you saw any of our 120th anniversary on social or some of the other executions we had, you saw iconic then and iconic now. And that word iconic, you're starting to see in our advertising a lot. And the way we came about that, I think, is a really interesting story. It's one that I love. We started, and there was some talk this morning about redoing brand vis IDs. We've just redone ours. But as we got into this, we started to look at, and this is why it started, as we started to look at creating EV materials, we realized that we started to use some trees, and it was calm, and it was not Cadillac. Cadillac is energy. Cadillac is really badass. And so we were like, what is this brand? And what does it look like? We're bold. We're a bold brand. These have been our brand values forever. So we're bold, optimistic, and sophisticated. And that bold is first. So as we looked at that and working with our partners at Leo Burnett who are here, we asked ourselves a question. If Cadillac disappeared from the world, what would be missing? What an easy but powerful question. And if you just look at this slide, what would be missing? It's an American icon and a symbol of the American dream. And what an amazing place for us to start as we move into our future. It's really amazing. So I love that story. I wanted to share it with you. That is how we got to iconic, because when we looked at it, we were like, if we weren't here, an American icon would be missing. And most people here have a story in their family about the Cadillacs and how it represented the American dream. And again, what a beautiful place to be in, the American dream. And I'm going to get into some of what we've discovered about our owners in a little bit, but that's our starting place. And, we started to say, are we going to call ourselves an icon? How do we own this? And you don't call yourself an icon. That's a terrible, terrible mistake. And we would not do that. You're just asking for trouble. But what are we? We're representing the American dream. So as we looked at it, we said, okay, be iconic actually is what our brand is. And I myself think about it all the time. If I want to be iconic, what am I going to do? How am I going to act? What am I going to say? Because being iconic is really being the most inspirational and aspirational version of yourself. And it's a very personal thing. Everyone has who they hold up, what they want to be, how they want to act, how they want to be remembered and seen. And so that's where everything starts from. And I know I spent a lot of time on this one slide, and I don't have a ton of time, but I think it's so important to understand where we're coming from as a brand. So now we're going into a new era. It's a new category, and we've got a lot of new challenges, and we've got a lot of new competitors. And in automotive, we're not used to that. We're really not used to these new, it's been the big three and then the Europeans and, the Japanese, the Koreans, whatever. You had the people who have been here the whole time. Now we have all these new people coming in. And it's challenging us. It's a good thing. Automotive needed this challenge. So it's helping us to up our game and to think about what experiences do we need to be in? We can't just do things the way that they've always been done. So at Cadillac, and this really, it feeds into, we have a history of innovation. I'll talk about that in a second, but it feeds into who we are. We are ready for the challenge and we're ready to innovate. When we look at this, I have this sort of these 3 steps. This is how we think about things. The first thing is know your audience and your voice. And I'll talk about our audience and how we got there. But know your audience and know your voice. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is you have to understand where that audience is and where you can create connections. And I know that like Casey talked about a little bit before, Dina was talking about connections with people. You talk about content. How do you really connect with people? And then the third thing is whenever you know you're going to be somewhere, how do you show up differently? So you're not going to create a connection by knowing where someone is and then running banner ads. That can't be your strategy. So how are you going to connect with those people? You're going to do it by showing up differently. So those are our 3 steps. So I talked a little bit about the history of innovation at Cadillac, all the way from interchangeable parts in the first electric starter, all the way up to where we are leading in a lot of the hands-free semi-autonomous driving. We have a history of innovation, and it's how we approach everything. And 4 years ago, it's how we started approaching our audience. We said, I don't actually believe in targeting by demographics. I think that if you look around, you know, there's probably a few buckets that we'd all fit into, and we're all very different people. And so as we started to look at that, we took a group of who at the time were the best model of what our future customers would look like. Some of the people newer to the brand, some of the loyalists, people who had bought a lot of vehicles. We took that and then we modeled that against the whole entire US. And that's how we found our audience. We said, and I like to call them our future owners. Here's the people who belong in a Cadillac. Let the data speak to you. And then let the data help you show up. So that's what we did. And we did this in 2019. And it completely shifted the way we do things because now we're audience first. And, you know, we have Jen from Ampersand who's going to come up here with me. And if you look at, you know, working with someone like Ampersand, they really allow us to work with who's the audience and how do we show up. So that's where we got to. And that led us into people-based marketing. Now, this was in 2019. I think this conversation is way more relevant today, even than it was then, because at that point, everyone was leaning on cookies. And we were like, we're not just going to build off cookies. We're not just building these cookie pools. Who are the people? How do we find them? And how do we connect with them? And so that got us into this people-based marketing where working with Kara, we were able to use M1 and say, here's who these people are. Now, I talked a little bit about the American dream and how we're such a representation of that at Cadillac, right? This is one of my favorite things that we learned when we did this data analysis. The title of president and CEO way over indexes in our data. Why is that? Because we have a bunch of entrepreneurs, of people who are out there making their own way, thinking about how they're going to change the world. And when they do that, Cadillac becomes part of their story. And that has been true since 1902 when this brand started. And it's such a beautiful thing. So now we really go out and we're looking at how do we use our first party data? How do we use the data that other people have to go out and really market to people and create connections? And it's led us to be able to do some pretty interesting things. So the first thing that we did with this is we wrote a manifesto. And it's been printed, so you may have seen it somewhere. But this manifesto really talked about this entrepreneurial spirit, about charging forward, about making your own way. And right after we wrote it, Regina King, who's been a friend of the brand for a while, read it and she said, this is my story. And she went to the Oscars with us and started talking about the manifesto and Cadillac. And that's how we started our partnership with her. And I think it's another thing that Dina mentioned is how do you make sure that the person really aligns with the brand? The other thing that was really interesting, and there's 2 examples here, and one of them is a little funny. So the first one, something that was really interesting, you know, we had been running in NFL, and NFL is very expensive, right? We looked, and when we checked our data, NCAA football had the same or a little higher index as the NFL. So what did we do? We knew where our audience was. We figured out they like football, and how did we show up differently? If you're watching on Saturdays, you'll see Joel Klatt living in his lyric for a week. It's the spot that we have this year. Every year, he and sometimes Gus Johnson and his wife even made a special appearance. But we have that content that runs on those days. And it's all about what is going to connect with people in that moment. The next one is kind of funny. So another thing that we found out about our audience is they really like culinary. And I was like, great, I don't understand how we're going to make food work with a car. It just doesn't make sense to me. And my team, instead of taking that as direction, took it as a challenge, because I always say, let the data speak. And they came back with this idea that, honestly, it's on a slide. So, well, it could have been a big fail, but it's definitely not. The fail was me not trusting the data on this one. So what we did is we did something called Electric Kitchen, and we worked with some Michelin-rated chefs in LA, and we had an event, and we had them create food that was inspired by the vehicle. And then we recorded them talking about it. And we turned those into 60-second documentaries. So it was able to take the language of people who love food and who are foodies, and to talk about the vehicle in their language, not as, a car influencer or something. So it ended up working really well. We got picked up by some of the entertainment shows in LA, and it was a really good, I think, learning for me, honestly, to just say, you know what, go take a chance. Sometimes they're going to work, sometimes they're not, but it's worth it. And then this is, I think, just important. We really are using these halo vehicles to drive a brand for me. I want everyone to change when I say I work for Cadillac, I want to change the story from my grandpa loved his, my dad, my uncle, whoever, to how do I get one? And that's what I probably right now I'm at like a 50-50 on that. So we're getting there. It's my biggest metric. And then last thing here, we're reimagining experiential, again, creating connections with people. So we're at the US Open now. We are one of the key sponsors. And that was just an amazing way to really show up in something that is a big cultural moment. Within that, and in a few other things, and if you were at the Detroit Auto Show, you may have seen our electric theater. The electric theater is, again, how do you show up and every time someone interacts with you, have them walk away feeling different about your brand? So what we did, instead of creating a stand with a vehicle, is there's a lot of immersive art, like people may have been at Van Gogh. That was an inspiration for us. Wow, it's like creating a new conversation. It's a connection. So we have something called the Electric Theater. And if you haven't seen it, definitely find somewhere where it is and go in. There's one in Glendale, which is the last column there. But it tells the story in a way that you're just fully immersed and you walk out with goosebumps and feeling different about the brand. And then the last thing is a pop-up that we have in Glendale, California, where we do have the Electric Theater. So with that said, I think, people are starting to notice us. And as Jen is joining me up on stage to have a little conversation, we'll hear from someone who's taken notice.
Hey, excuse me. Your car is awesome. What do you do for a living?
Well, I'm married to Jill Biden, and I make sure we're making a lot more electric vehicles in America.
Oh, that's amazing. What kind of car is this?
It's a Cadillac.
Okay. And an electric vehicle at that.
That's exactly right, and it's quick.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
If you want to get in the back and come ride with me. But I'm going all the way to Washington here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. See you guys. But I want to go to Washington. No.
I just met the president. Let's go.
Well, I think we all can say that we've learned a lot in the last few minutes. My first question is, how do I get a lyric? My husband is in the industry, and we've talked about our next car. And as I'm in market at the moment and placed my order for a Yukon, lyric was top on the list. And he's like, he laughed at me. He's like, you can't get one. So it's funny you brought that up.
They are a little hard to get right now, yeah. But my best advice, get on the list, go online.
Yeah, when we were prepping a little bit, you had mentioned like a crazy number of hand raisers. So why don't you tell me a little more about how Lyric has brought in more people into the brand, and then just overall the halo effect. Talk a little bit more about your hand raising efforts.
Yeah, so right now we have I think it's over 250,000 hand raisers. It's right in that neighborhood. It's been absolutely amazing how many people have been interested in the vehicle. The campaign has really been going on since 2020 when we first revealed the car. Immediately raising their hands and wanting to get involved. The marketing has really been sort of twofold. The top layer of the marketing has been about EV awareness and awareness of the Lyric and that Cadillac has an EV coming. And so there you saw our campaigns like Regina King did one, we called it The Beauty of Defiance, and she was changing the scenes with the snap of her fingers. It was really a great way to show off the car. And showed some of the features and some of the electricity. Then as we went into ordering and really having the car available, we've had a few campaigns, an evolution of the campaigns this year. We had something that was called Fortune Favors the Fearless, which was in the ad. And that really, which evolved a little, led us into the ordering moment when we've put this car on sale twice. The first time was for the debut edition. That sold out in just over 10 minutes. And then the second time we did some early ordering. So that was a lot of the campaign was sign up, get text messages. And then in that we had 2 days because we early opened and it sold out in under 24 hours. So now where we are is there's two real levels to the campaign. Hopefully you all have seen our red or our gold spot that we worked. Yeah, we just launched and worked with Labyrinth. And the music is beautiful. There's two very distinct versions. And that's really about raising the awareness because people still don't really understand that Cadillac has an electric vehicle. And then we have all this working media that's, people who are interested, making sure they get on the list, making sure they understand the process.
Yeah. So on top of that, you still have your regular sales you have to hit, right? So we talked about a little in our prep about, the halo of Lyric and what's coming, but how do you manage some of that mid to lower funnel of selling the vehicles that are available now?
Yeah. 6 months ago, we really were struggling with vehicle inventory. So it made our job easier in a lot of ways. We didn't have to worry about having those two things going at the same time. But what we have noticed, and with that slide I had with the halo vehicles, is when we talk about those halo vehicles, it gets Cadillac top of mind, and then people start shopping. So we have this sort of lower funnel, more performance in market media that we can tune up or down regionally when we need to, based on what's happening in the marketplace.
Yeah, for sure. And so as you're thinking about audience and building that funnel, you mentioned the audiences you've custom created. How are you doing that with what you can share today as part of a first party data strategy? There's a lot of buzz in this space around clean rooms and clean data, agnostic data. What can you touch on with that as you're looking all levels of the funnel, but how does audience, it's such an important factor to you. How do you look at what's coming in that regard too on the tech?
Yeah, we lean very heavily on Kara with this one. Honestly, we use M1, which is their it's called Mercury now, but M1 is like a part of it. So Mercury is a database of the whole entire US. And so by using our data and safely matching it, and then having this unique source of identity truth that then allows us to go partner with people in clean rooms and in safe environments, that's how we're approaching it. And we're very careful at each step of the way to make sure that it's privacy compliant and that we're keeping things within the boundary.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And as you guys are at the cutting edge of, especially you mentioned our partnership, which has been really great on both sides. A lot of it is data audience driven, and that is helpful working with M1 and really diving into your audience. A couple other things we prepared was, one of the things I've heard you speak about before is flipping the funnel in the retail end of things. You sort of touched on it a little bit, but in your mind, as you have creative and media and the tiers are all disparate, whatever, even though there's no tiers anymore and everyone's looking at the tier lists, there's still a dealer group, dealer groups, and the brand. How do you manage from a head of marketing, all these big, beautiful brand things? How do you manage the team on the more of the lower funnel type things?
So when we talk about flipping the funnel, honestly, it's really the mindset of being audience first. And typically, when people are doing lower funnel activities, that's when they know who they're targeting, they're measuring, and then the big, beautiful brand stuff tends to sort of live on its own. When we look at this, and part of what I was talking about when we look at where our audience index is, for instance, when we're doing college game day on Saturdays, we're not direct targeting people, but we know that our audience is there. So I think that's really from a, sort of theoretical perspective, what we're talking about is know where the audience is, and don't just say that it's a luxury customer and because they happen to be watching. We used to always use This Is Us, but I think like we're past
Yeah, it's over.
the weekly cry.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Inspiring, we both chatted about Casey and JK's presentation. One of the things that my team and anyone who's ever worked with me knows I love is feedback and team building and advice. So let's talk a little bit about just getting to know you a little more. And how do you have a great team? A lot of them are here. How do you build the morale around the team? You obviously are building a good morale around the brand externally, but internally at GM, how do you take that same passion you have externally, internally? Yeah, ask the audience, right?
No, but I think honestly, and it's all of us together. I think we really feel like a team, and we could say like a family, but like I think we respect each other a lot. We're really trying to find a lot of moments to be together. I think we have very open, frank conversations, even when they're difficult. And I think that, having that transparency. And the other thing is we're really right now trying to build a culture where it's okay to make mistakes. And Casey talked a lot about, I think it's, it's really hard for people to get out of that mindset, but it's the only way that we learn. And it's interesting whenever you look at a lot of startups, the business they're in is oftentimes a mistake. It's not what they started doing, right? So I think, it's just but we try to have a lot of dialogue, and I try to ask a lot, what do people want more of? What do they want less of? What's working, what's not, because I think it's an evolution, but I do have an awesome team.
Yeah, I would agree. You have a great team. What we had said about, well, and I was thinking as you said something, the making mistakes, right? You had mentioned like you didn't believe that the electric kitchen was going to be a thing. So it's, I think as a leader for all of us here listening, that you and Casey both made mistakes vulnerable. That makes everyone more human. And that's all we have at the end of the day is our word. And we're all trying to figure out the same thing. Let's see, what else? I think that as you're thinking about what's next for Cadillac within the boundaries of the EV world, how you said that you're thinking about education, and you and I chatted about this a little bit, is like, whose job is it to educate everyone about the EV world? Like, that is the thing I think about. I was at the auto show chatting with some of our friends from S&P, and they were saying that the charger, people don't know where to get the charging stations, right? Like, where can you go? And so whose job is it to educate? And I think we all have an interest, but I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I think this is an area, and whenever, like, there's probably a lot of my team right now, like, oh, EV education.
Sorry, I should have asked Eric.
We're all struggling with it, right? Because there's so many jobs to be done. But I really think that one falls across a lot of different areas. I think a lot of it is on us to make sure that our customers understand, this is how you'll take a road trip in the future. This is how you charge your vehicle. This is how you get something in your garage to be able to charge your vehicle. Like all these things, there's governmental things as well. If they're saying by 2035 in California, we can't be selling gas powered vehicles, how do they get people comfortable with that? Biden in the lyric is like, part of it too. So it really falls in a lot of different places. And I think it's one of those things that it's really important, and it needs to be everywhere.
Yeah, and I think you started with that. Without these other brands, we wouldn't kind of be where we are today as an industry. I think education comes along with that. We have a few minutes left. I think we want to open it up for questions. Anything else? I think let's ask the audience. So anyone have any questions for Melissa? Gabe in the front row.
So I'm going to answer this one I'm going to kind of go around and come back to what you're saying. First of all, I think Tesla and what Elon did with Tesla is amazing, and how he changed hearts and minds for EVs, right? So coming into this, that was my perspective. And I really thought Tesla's sort of untouchable over here. So we built our EV audience not really looking at Tesla. What we found, though, is that we're starting to see Tesla people be interested. And so, again, because I don't go for demographics, or I don't go for, we're going to do this or that, I'm just letting the data tell me that. And so now we're just adjusting a little, but it's been an interesting thing, I think, and it surprised me. Other questions? Anything? Personal, professional? Emily? I said anything, and all these hands came up. So, yeah. So what he was talking about is our Celestiq vehicle, which is the ultra luxury EV that's coming out, and that we've started softly and quietly revealing, and we have a big reveal coming up in about a week and a half or so. And it is going to compete with Rolls-Royce and Bentley. It's completely hand-built, and each one is one of one. You design your vehicle, it's built to your specs, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it's the pinnacle of technology, and it's amazing. And
So I get one of those.
I like it. It's all working. So it's what's been interesting for this vehicle, because there will only be smaller volumes that are sold, is it acts as a halo, but it really tells the story. Cadillac was the standard of the world, and that's how we were known. And we talk about it. Our name means the best of, and the Cadillac of, right? So this vehicle is us coming back to that and saying, how do we show people that Cadillac is Cadillac again? And that vehicle really tells that story for us. So we is soon, as soon as the answer. Right now, honestly, the lyric demand has been, it's completely exceeded our expectations. So it is right now about getting on a list and getting in line for it. We are working right now because we're trying to get every unit into customer hands. And so dealers don't have them for test drives. We are regionally going around. And so if anyone does want to see one, honestly, signing up for our emails is the best way, and letting your dealer know, because then they'll let you know. Yeah, so music is so important to us. And I think in anything that we do, and Cadillac shows up in song lyrics, I think it's like it's 11,427 times or something. It's a huge number, right?
That stat really
So
well.
I have it. Phil can tell us the real number, but it's a lot. And so music really conveys emotion, and for Cadillac, emotion is so important. So as we were looking at this campaign, Labyrinth was someone who has a lot of really interesting music right now. He does all the music for Euphoria on HBO, and we worked with him to have him custom make the soundtrack to this. And we actually released his song before he did. So it was just something of like a moment in culture, and something that felt like it aligned. And he really kind of aligns with the brand. And now we have 2 versions of his song that are bespoke to Cadillac. Yeah. All
I
right.
think we have time for one more question, and then we're done.
All right. Oh, who has the most burning question? Someone can ask me later too.
Waving.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, here.
Sorry, Emma.
So Juanita is going to be up later and can really answer that question. I think we'll dive into that. But I think the audiences that we target from a multicultural perspective are very important. And I think there's a lot of examples that we have of, we just won an OMA award for what we did in Black Music Month in June, with Killer Mike and with Nyla with the NFT. So I'm going to let Juanita answer that better, because there's so much going on there, and it's really amazing work. And I think, making true connections with people is so important. And so that's a huge importance to us that we maintain that.